we keep talking about the Chiefs like, they're Thanos because they're inevitable.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast, presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Helman, and the countdown to Super Bowl 59 is on. Obviously, we learned our contestants on Sunday, and now the wait begins. If previous experience is anything to me, these first few days are going to feel like an agonizing wait while we get to the actual festivities of the Super Bowl. Because with only that game left on the schedule, there's not much else to do other than look forward to the draft, which is a wild thing to say, but it's completely true. You've got the offseason all-star games like the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine Bowl going on. So if you're eliminated, you're talking draft, you're talking coaching hires, which is what we're going to get to here in a little bit. Other than that, it's just a lot of waiting for things to finally ramp up with this game. So in the theme of that, we're going to take a preliminary look at this Super Bowl matchup early in the show today, because we touched on it on Sunday night's recap on the Monday show. Yeah, it's the second time the Eagles and the Chiefs have played in the last 3 years. I sense, maybe I'm just too terminally online, I sense a sort of fatigue with this game, that we've got the Eagles going against the Chiefs so quickly after they already did it. Last year's Super Bowl was a rematch as well between the Chiefs and the 49ers. I push back on all of that. I think this is a very exciting, enticing matchup for anybody that likes football. And I'm going to set out to prove it. Carmen Vitali and myself, we're going to talk about what's different this time around, because I promise you plenty of it is. So much has changed that you're not thinking about this time when the Chiefs and the Eagles face off in the Super Bowl from 2 years ago when the game happened in Phoenix. So we're going to start off that way. We're also going to check in with our guy, Jay Glazer, who was in Philadelphia for the NFC Championship game. Fun conversation with him. And then, as promised, we got a whole host of coaching news to get to. The Dallas Cowboys, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Jacksonville Jaguars all hired head coaches during the weekend, during the lead up to the championship games. We didn't want to step on that while we were recapping two of the biggest games of the year, but so much to get to, a lot of drama, and we'll have a chance to recap because a few of these guys have been introduced. So Carmen and I are going to go through the coaching cycle as well, what we like, what we don't like, what was bizarre, what was hard to explain, all that good stuff. Really fun conversation about the coaching hires. We're going to dive into that later. But first, as promised, let's get this thing on the road with a look at Super Bowl 59. All right, so Carmen Vitali joins us now, foxsports.com. And can I sell you on my pet cause for the next 2 weeks?
Okay.
I love this game.
Okay.
I love this game. And
yeah.
I'm expecting pushback here because we just saw it. People, a certain type of football fan is going to be over the Chiefs. Sure. I get that. We've seen the Eagles in this game against them just 2 years ago. But I think, in addition to, first of all, just being a heck of a matchup when you consider what I think is the best roster in the NFL going against the dynasty, the team going for a three-peat, the best quarterback in the league today, one of the best quarterbacks of all time already, one of the best coaches of all time. I love that. And on top of that, I think this is such a fun exercise in how much can change in such a short period of time. Because think back a year ago, Chiefs play the 49ers, and they played in 2019, right? Like, that's 4 years is an eternity in the NFL.
Absolutely.
We completely expect things to be vastly different. Yeah. There were huge pieces of those teams that hadn't even been there in 2019, the first time they played. You would expect, or at least I think a lot of people would expect, these are basically, quote unquote, the same teams from 2 years ago. And it couldn't be further from the truth. And I just think it is so fun to think about how quickly life changes in the NFL and how quickly good teams adapt and change themselves, even in such a short span of time. Why are you laughing at me?
Because, Dave, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
It's true.
I'm going to counterpoint your excitement about this game. It's not that I'm not excited, but this is still the Kansas City Chiefs. They are inevitable in their quest to do something that no other team has done before. This is the last frontier of the dynasty talk, of all of that. No one has ever gone back to back to back Super Bowl champions, and the Chiefs are now about to do it. And I can't help but think that they are going to accomplish their quest because they've accomplished every other history-making thing that they have set out to do. I think that the Eagles are going to give them a game. I think this is going to be a great game. And you're right. It is going to be different because these teams are drastically different than they were 2 years ago. However, I can't help but think the result is going to be the same.
That's totally fine. And yeah, 2 weeks out, spoiler alert, I believe the Chiefs opened as a small favorite, like 1 point, 1.5 points maybe, which ironically, I looked this up. The Chiefs opened as a favorite for Super Bowl 57 as well. Mm-hmm. And over the course of 2 weeks, the Eagles gradually shifted into the gambling favorite. I kind of expect the same thing to happen here. Because honestly, I think the Eagles, again, 1 to 53, 1 to 22 starters. I think you take the Eagles roster over the Chiefs every single time. The Chiefs just have enough advantages in enough very key inflection points to make this very interesting, as we saw, because the last game was a banger. But no, I want to go back to what you just said, because I think the Chiefs are the best example of this, because it doesn't take a genius to realize why the Eagles are different, right? Saquon Barkley's in this game. Right. They reinvented their entire defense. You've got 2 big name coordinators who were brought in to correct the mistakes of last year.
And they
did it in a big way. That's all easy. Even the Kansas City Chiefs are not the same team.
Exactly.
If you can get past the TikTok edits of people saying, save us Lamar Jackson, save us Josh Allen, save us Jalen Hurts, like the way the Chiefs got here outside of number 15 and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce deserves to be commended. Do you know how many guys who started on Sunday against Buffalo also played significant roles in the Super Bowl against Philadelphia?
I would venture to say not many, because it's Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones. I mean, the highlights are the same.
It's a fair amount. It's 15 guys.
Okay, all right.
But that is a substantial chunk of the roster that has completely changed. You've swapped out your offensive tackles since the last time this game happened. Orlando Brown, Andrew Wiley, key pieces of this team. L'Jarius Sneed, gone. Willie Gay, gone. Frank Clark, gone. Like, very quietly, they've just pushed new pieces into all sorts of little different areas. I mean, Joe Thuney is one of the best guards in football, and one of the biggest catalysts to the Chiefs being here is that he's been their left tackle for the last 3 weeks.
I was just going to say
5 weeks, whatever it is.
Yes, exactly. Like, proving just how athletic and incredible of a player he is in kicking out to tackle, which and seamlessly doing so for the most part, which shouldn't be allowed either. But you're right. I mean, and you look at the way that the Chiefs got here, which wasn't the same as how they got here last year, wasn't the same as how they got here 2 years ago when, again, it was against the Eagles. This time around, though, there were some similarities down the stretch, or in this postseason, I should say, from last year in particular, not necessarily against the Eagles in 2022, but last year when you talked about how this was a subpar receiving room, this offense just didn't really have the juice, all of that kind of stuff. Well, you've seen over the last few weeks with the Chiefs that though they got they got DeAndre Hopkins, though they had Hollywood Brown for parts of the season, that all didn't really materialize in the last couple of weeks. And it's gone back to, all right, Isaiah Pacheco is again running like he bites people. You've got some like really good protection for Patrick Mahomes, but again, he's improvising. You've seen a resurgence of Travis Kelce again in the postseason, so that this kind of looks like it has in different ways, though the way they got here is different.
It's funny. And this isn't intended as shade, but I think it's interesting because, like, if you were to watch a highlight package of how the Chiefs got here, it would probably look very familiar. But like when you dive deeper, it is a vastly different thing. I mean, you just mentioned the receivers. It's so funny the way that they've changed out this receiver core.
Yep.
Xavier Worthy has really grown into
what they wanted
that guy with juice. And think back to 2 years ago. They managed to win the game and ironically got the best game of Kadarius Toney's life before he disappeared. Maybe the only good game. It was Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, and Sky Moore at receiver. You've swapped that out for Xavier Worthy, DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown. That's after they had to find a way to deal with losing Rashee Rice for the season early on.
My guy Justin Watson has been a constant through all of this. I just want to point that one out also.
So many fun role players have been. Like Noah Gray deserves mention. We should shout out like the other two guys aside from Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith.
Right.
It's
They've
all
been
there.
Really the stability of that entire offense.
I just love the way various little pieces are rotating into the mix around, it's like the black hole is like Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And it's all like this other different stuff is getting thrown into the gravitational pull, and it's different every year. And I think it's interesting and exciting how they manage to reconfigure themselves to the same end result every year.
And it's not, I mean, we talked just now a lot about the offense, but it is defensively too. And Spags deserves so much credit for being able to move guys around to get different rotational pieces in there. Their defensive line, like you mentioned, looks completely different than it did 2 years ago against the Eagles. Guys like Trent McDuffie, who he was a rookie 2 years ago, and now he was a nickel corner. He's now outside corner. He's getting awards there too. Just there's so many moving parts and different pieces that Spags, I feel like, is just kind of really honed and like figured out exactly how to use his guys. I mean, I can't say enough about switching things up on Josh Allen for that last fourth down play in the AFC Championship game where that fooled everyone, including Josh Allen. Josh Allen had no idea that Trent McDuffie was coming because they make no mistake, if that hadn't worked, if that blitz hadn't gotten home, the Bills had multiple big plays there that could have absolutely won them the game. But Spags dialed it up at the exact right time. There's so few guys that are as good at playing the mind games and the mental games that it takes to really put together a really good defense. Not only with the players, but again, to have all this change, to have all this rotation, and then to be able to pull out the exact right play at the exact right time and set up these teams in the way that Spags is able to do. I mean, the In Spags We Trust shirts have never been more applicable, and that's saying a lot because when they came out, that was what was carrying this team last year.
I gotta dig my In Spags We Trust.
I was going to say you
out.
have one of those.
It's so funny to think. Like I just thought of this when you mentioned Trent McDuffie. 2022 brought the Chiefs Isaiah Pacheco, George Karlaftis, Trent McDuffie, Brian Cook, Leo Chanel. So many guys who back in 2022 were like, is it going to be like this every year? I'm just happy to be here and play a role on a Super Bowl team.
Yes, exactly.
And now in year three, they're like, it is going to be like this every year. And we're a huge part of it now.
They've grown into, like not just these surprising young players, but foundational pieces. I mean, you talk about George Karlaftis, what he was able to do 2 games ago and 3 sacks in that game. I mean, that's something that is something like, he has just continued to ascend, and those really fun, spunky new players in 2022, Spags has now turned into, again, foundational guys that you can rely on with a defense you can rely on with an offense that is better than it was last year. And again, I say, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Well, on the flip side of that, and with all due respect to Josh Allen, which, I mean, another incredibly impressive win from the Chiefs. I do think this will be the toughest test that they face all year because the difference in Philadelphia is that they supercharged what was already an offense capable of winning a Super Bowl because now Steve Spagnuolo gets to go against the team that rushes the ball better than anyone in the NFL. 621 attempts on the year. They haven't needed to throw it as often as you would expect from a Super Bowl team, but they proved against Washington when they need to. They absolutely can. It won't take anything away from the accomplishments of the Kansas City Chiefs, but it starts to feel like, to me, if you can handle this rushing attack behind this offensive line, if you can play the run well enough to take Saquon Barkley out of the game and then still find a way to stop Jalen Hurts and these receiving options, my early take is that it will be the most impressive thing that the Chiefs do, at least defensively, during this entire run.
I do like this matchup with the Chiefs because of another strength of this Chiefs defense is the linebackers, Nick Bolton, those guys. And that's something that if you're going to have a prayer against the Philadelphia Eagles, that's the unit that has to play the best, I think, given what they can do on the ground with Saquon, what Jalen Hurts can do with his own legs if he is healthy, which he should be by the time the Super Bowl rolls around. And then all of the underneath stuff, like you see the stuff with Dallas Goedert and how he has played such a clutch role for the last, multiple seasons. Dallas Goedert is synonymous with clutch in so many ways. And then you have the guy that you can go deep on over the top. And with A.J. Brown. And the Eagles are so good. Kellen Moore is so good at picking those spots because there's only so much you can defend as an NFL defense. And that's why you hear all these coaches always talk about, or even players talk about, we need to make them one-dimensional. We need to make them one-dimensional. The Eagles are like four-dimensional at this point with so many different weapons and so many ways to beat you that even taking away one of those dimensions doesn't do much for you because they still have answers to the problems that you're presenting. So I agree with you. I think this, please make no mistake, while me saying that I think the Chiefs are still going to ultimately pull this out, my family's from Philly. I have a whole group text with my girl cousins.
Oh, yeah.
And we're all like, go Birds.
Skin in the game.
I have skin in the game. I literally have the group chat of all of my girl cousins and it's just this long thread of go Birds, go Birds, go Birds, go Birds. They are unhinged. And I want that for them. But it's just, again, we keep talking about the Chiefs like, they're Thanos because they're inevitable.
Yeah, well.
But I do think that this is going to be quite a game.
People like to say that we use the Thanos analogy all the time. Thanos was defeated.
Right. At
the end of that whole saga.
Right. So is Saquon Iron Man?
I hope he doesn't have to make the same level of sacrifice as Iron Man. I know. Needless to say, I think this illustrates very perfectly. I can't wait for this game. And I get it. It's fun to see new teams. It's fun to see new matchups. I think that's where a lot of the griping comes from. Mm-hmm. But schematically, narratively, what's at stake for the Chiefs, what it would mean for the Eagles if they were the team to stop it. And I'll steal this point from our guy, Henry McKenna, who said it on the recap show after the Eagles also were a team that disrupted the Patriots' string of success. Says a lot about an organization when you're able to pull off victories like that.
Well, do you remember earlier this season before their week 5 bye week where we were all like, uh-oh, things don't look so good in Philly?
Yes.
I was guilty of it too.
Throughout
I will be the first to say it.
Yes.
I will be the first to say it.
Every Sunday.
It was are the vibes okay? Yeah. And even after that, even as they were winning games, it was yeah, but it feels like I can't trust this team because the vibes are off. And then they go out since that week 5 bye. They've lost one game.
They've been the most impressive team in the NFL for the vast majority of this season.
And I have to think that
Josh and Lamar were amazing and the Chiefs are the Chiefs and they're here.
If anybody's immune from
I said what I said.
The Chiefs of it all, the narrative of it all, don't you think it's Nick Sirianni and his crew?
I think my job here is done. I don't want to hear any complaining about this game. I'm pumped for it. we've got so much more to say about it. We got plenty of time to do it too. So we'll leave it here for now. Had a wonderful conversation before you and I jump into head coaching talk and coaching vacancies. I had a great conversation with Jay Glazer, actually about these Philadelphia Eagles. So let's jump to that next. All right, joined now by the guy who is fresh off of what looked like a really fun trip to Philadelphia,
Yep.
the host city of the new NFC champions. Jay, I guess paint the picture for me, man. Let's start out there. How was the trip to Philly? And what do we make of this incredible performance of the Eagles to get into Super Bowl 59?
Trip to Philly was incredible. First of all, like, you want to talk about like my life where I always have these moments where I'm still waiting to wake up at 5th grade and none of it happened. Like, my mom woke me up. I'm like, no, I didn't really do that. And the coolest thing is we get to run the Rocky Steps. And first of all, I used to box in Philly, outside of Philly, in like 88, 89. And I never ran those steps. And Stallone ends up becoming a training partner of mine at my gym Unbreakable and one of my best friends now. Like, he and I lean into each other. So the guy who's boxed, incredible. But I actually say, hey, man, we're all running the steps together. Can we FaceTime you? And, I talked to him like a couple days earlier, and he's like, no problem, no problem. I told him like it was going to be 11 o'clock, and I think he thought I was saying Pacific, because when me and all the guys FaceTimed him, and we had cameras, he was still in bed. So, or he was napping or whatever, and he gets up, he's like, oh my God, I got to fix my hair. I'm like, hey, bro, you're Rocky. You don't got to do nothing. You're good. And but it was great for him to say, man, hit him in the body, hit him in the jaw, hit him until your hands hurt. It was just amazing. And for somebody like me, man, who, I've lived this world of football and fighting, the Rocky Steps it's majestic for me. It's awesome. And then just listen, the crowd there. First of all, then I sent him this video. The crowd has the Rocky music going. There's two things happening. Dan Quinn's running the stairs. And
Sure, of course he is. Of course Dan Quinn is running the stairs.
But the Rocky music's going. Theme song's going. I'm like, bro, how cool is that? Whether you win or lose, you just ran the steps in the stadium to the Rocky music. But also the whole place with the Rocky theme song, waving these towels. And I actually sent Stallone a video about it, which he posted. I'm like, dude, think about what your life is. Like, how many underdogs you have motivated to go above and beyond in our life. And he really is. He's symbolic of every time somebody is trying to fight for something where they don't know they could do. So I know this is about football, but for me, it was about a lot more than that.
Can we take a minute too, as Philly's in the Super Bowl, to just give them some shine for, I think, such an underrated place to go to a football game. Like, people talk about Lambeau. Lambeau is amazing. There's a lot of amazing places to go see an NFL game, but you got the stadium just south of downtown. You got the art museum right there. It's all easy to get to.
You got
the
crowd. Passion. It's incredible. No, Philly's great. And restaurants are amazing in Philadelphia. And the people in Philadelphia, they're great, dude. They're great. And I love the flavor of that city. I love the people. I love getting into it with people. You know me, man. I just, always love having some fun with them. But, and the Eagles, like, every time I go down to Philly, I spend a lot of time there. I trained Lane Johnson for years. Lane lived with my son and I for like half a year. The first year we trained him, trained a bunch of those guys on that team. And when I go in there, they've always made me feel like part of the family over there, which is really cool. I train with the team when I'm there, go out into the city, and I just love the people, man. I love real. And it don't get much more real than Philly fans.
So now that they've done this, they win big over Washington, they get back to the Super Bowl a second time in 3 years. It's such an interesting time to look back at where they've been. I mean, obviously last season you had the collapse after getting to 11 wins on the year. Even at times this year, you think back to the win against Cleveland, you think back to the win against Carolina. This felt like a team that was just trying to keep things on the rails and not let last year happen again. And now they're back in the Super Bowl. How do you kind of see them rediscovering their mojo in the second half of this season?
Their bye week. Their bye week was huge. Their bye week, they did so much self-scouting from the head coach to the quarterback to the coordinators to, hey, what really works here? What doesn't work there? How do we connect more? How do we bring it in together more? They did a great job. A lot of teams in the bye week, they go vacation. The Eagles did. The Eagles self-scattered. The Eagles brought themselves a lot closer together. And you saw what happened. This is a sport where you got to lean into your brothers on your right and brothers on your left. And you got to do it together. And that's really the difference in the Eagles that I saw.
I got to hit on one thing you said while you were on the sideline at the Link on Sunday, and that's jumping forward to these coaching hires. So much stuff happened over the weekend. What jumped out to me was what you mentioned about Aaron Glenn, the new head coach of the New York Jets, mentioning, of course, we got to bring it back to Aaron Rodgers. Very curious to hear about the timeline there. He said sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
I understand that. That's the first thing you got to figure out before you can move forward with the Jets. Yeah. How quickly do we see this playing out? And is it possible that it plays out with Aaron Rodgers playing for Aaron Glenn in 2025?
That part I can't tell you. What I can tell you, what Aaron told me is that, hey, I don't want to drag it out. And I want to make this decision sooner than later, but I want to go meet with him before I make this decision. He and the new GM, Muji, they both want to go and meet with him in person, which is a smart thing to do. You don't want to make any decision sight unseen. And you hear a million things about Aaron Rodgers. You want to make that decision. It's your decision, your eyes, your ears. I did say, though, hey, man, if you're going to come out here to Malibu and go meet with him, you're going to be sidetracked because what we got going on here a little bit. So I said, put him for a little extra time in traffic here. The crazy part is yesterday, we've obviously had all these fires here. And then yesterday we got flood warnings and mudslides. It's like, oh my God. But, look, I've known AG since he was a rookie. And AG's always had this attitude because he was small, but he's fast, dude. He came out, he ran like a 4.32 or something, the combine. He was so fast. But he always had this attitude of like, all right, you think I'm small? I'm gonna explode up and punch you in the mouth. And I think you've seen his defenses have that same attitude. Detroit, it was almost hard. They had the fight, you could see it, but they were so decimated with injuries. And when they didn't have those injuries, man, they were obviously all world. But I think even their playoff game, they had one extra injury, and it was like the dam just broke. But he's going to have this attitude of he already knows the building. He already knows the owner. And the owner over there, I've said it, Vince Lombardi can't win over there unless the owner changes. It's his culture that brings them down. So it's going to be interesting, when Aaron Glenn learned from Sean Payton. Okay. I remember when Sean first brought him on, all the way back then. This is me not saying this because Aaron Glenn's now a head coach. All the way back then, Sean Payton said, hey, man, you're going to see Dennis Allen get a head coaching job, but the next star on our coaching staff, I'm telling you, is Aaron Glenn. Do you know him? I said, dude, I've known him as a player. He said, that dude will be a star as a head coach. And this was 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was. I don't remember how long ago it was that he first, joined that staff. But he also experienced, I always use this experience of Sean Payton went to New Orleans and taught Mr. Benson how to be an owner, how to change that culture. And that's what needs to happen with the Jets as well. So he saw it firsthand what had happened.
It's an uphill battle, like you said. We know the history of the New York Jets, but just with everything I know about Aaron Glenn, what I've seen of him, and what I've learned about him since he broke onto the scene in the last few years, I got to say, man, I think he's pretty well suited for it.
You know what I love, too? Some of his players were saying that, hey, we have this attitude that we learned from Coach Glenn, like, we're savages. We're a bunch of savages. I'd love to hear that, man. That's what you want to hear. You don't want to hear your defensive players saying, yeah, we're butterflies. You want to hear them say they're savages.
Valid point. I cannot wait to see how that goes. Jay, hope you enjoyed your trip, man. I appreciate you taking the time. We'll catch up with you soon.
Absolutely, brother. Appreciate you, man. See you at the Super Bowl.
You know it.
Thanks again to Jay for hopping on, and it's the perfect segue to talk about what has been a busy few days in the hiring cycles of the various coaching searches around the league, Carmen.
Yeah.
And so, at this point, it's Tuesday. A lot of this stuff happened on like Thursday and Friday. We're a little bit behind the news cycle. I'm trusting in the audience to be mostly up to speed on the actual events that have happened.
Sure.
But it's press conference day around the NFL because all of these guys got introduced around the league on Monday. So very quickly, Liam Cohen is the new head coach in Jacksonville, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator. Aaron Glenn is the new head coach for the Jets, Lions, DC. Cowboys hire Brian Schottenheimer, their offensive coordinator under Mike McCarthy. And Pete Carroll is back in the league as the head coach of the Raiders. All of that happened on Monday. And I love it because you look at the hires, you look at the decisions, and you evaluate the resumes and the vibes and the coaching tree. And this guy knew that guy, so he'll be a success that way. And then they all get up in front of a microphone and we can just make snapshot judgments based on how they handle themselves. For instance, Jay Glazer just referenced Aaron Glenn taking the job in New York. Aaron Glenn gets up in front of the New York media and says, we're the freaking New York Jets and we're built for this shit, and I'm on board. That's all it really takes. I liked the hire anyway, but if you can give me a soundbite like that, I am on board and I'm ready to see what you got.
AG is filled with that. Not that the New York media might hear most of them, but from every player I've ever talked to that's played for him, from any guy that has played with him or been his coach or anybody like that, there is not a single person that knows Aaron Glenn on any sort of meaningful level that would not run through a wall for that man, because he is so intense, but he is so fiercely.
I think I'm one of those people now.
He's so fiercely and like violently supportive of you. He's so much fun. I got to sit down with him before last season and kind of pick his brain for about 30 to 45 minutes. And it was such a wonderful and illuminating conversation just into his mind, how he views things. But it first and foremost always started with his players and getting the trust of his players and being on the side of his players and rewarding his players. Everything revolved around the players, which is something that kind of permeated throughout Detroit, as you saw.
Jets also named Darren Mogi as their general manager, which they hired Glenn before they hired their GM. Just sort of gives you a frame of reference for how highly they think of him. Glenn was a former first-round pick by the Jets.
Yes.
We talked about it on an episode last week.
He knows what being a New York Jet means.
He's got ties to like every good defensive coach of the last 25 years. Let me throw this out here as a preface for everything we're about to talk about. We don't know how the hell any of this is going to age, but on paper, for what the Jets have and for what the Jets need, I like this hire a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now let's move through some of these other ones that
we might have more questions.
We might have more questions about. And let's start with the elephant in the room, as is always the case, the Dallas Cowboys. Word started circulating halfway through last week that, they talked to Deion Sanders and they interviewed Robert Saleh and which way might this go? And like halfway through the week, I got to give a shout out to my guy, Sean Sharif, who does a great job on 105.3 The Fan, one of the local radio stations in Dallas. He was on this on like Tuesday of last week. He was like, Brian Schottenheimer is going to talk to the Cowboys and he's got a better shot of getting this job than I think a lot of people are going to give him credit for. And it felt like a typo. And then it started gaining traction. And then on Friday night, it get like the worst sorts of news stories are the ones
I was just going.
Friday night is for like terrible news, not we hired a new head coach.
The Friday news dump is historically, like if you've taken journalism classes or anything like that, you know that bad news that you have to get out there goes out on Friday because no one's paying attention on Friday. Everybody, like, that's your way of saying, all right, we got this news out there. We don't really want to talk about it. We don't want it to gain any traction. So announcing a head coaching hire on Friday nights with a half-ass graphic, by the way. I'm sorry. Like, it was...
It's very anti-Cowboys. And like,
I know. Usually there's so much more pomp and circumstance and everything. Like they're the center of attention.
The joke was kind of that they were going to announce it on Sunday during the Eagles-Commanders game
which I would have actually understood.
Staying relevant.
Yes.
They just get it out of the way Friday.
And taking some shine away from some division rivals.
Well, people had the weekend to talk about it, but Schottenheimer also had his introductory press conference. And I got to say, again, I'm just making snap judgments based on sound bites, but I liked what I heard from Brian Schottenheimer himself.
Right.
He talked about wanting to use motion and misdirection and tempo and coach to the strengths of his players, which is the type of stuff you want to hear from a head coach. And he had this bar. He said, I'm really good at X's and O's, but I'm great with people. And after that, Dak Prescott, who likes Shotty enough to go to the press conference, out loud at the presser said, "Yes, sir." Shout out to my friend Jess Navarez for that little tidbit. But okay, I'm on board with that. I hear it. I like it. Again, we don't know how any of this is going to age, but Schottenheimer's coached in the NFL for 20 plus years. Right. He's called plays before. He did it in Seattle. I can squint and I start to see a world where this makes sense. Unfortunately, the other people that sit at a Cowboys press conference really kind of ruined this for me. Because as good and confident as Brian Schottenheimer might have sounded, Jerry and Stephen Jones, the owners and Jerry's the general manager, Stephen's the chief operating officer, they just sounded defensive and complacent to me.
Yeah, I mean, the whole process with which this all came about was just so Bush League. It really was.
It's a great phrase for it.
Like, and again, if you're going to set these expectations for your franchise, if you're going to be out there and you're going to say, we want the best of the best and we're all in and this, that, the other, and you want to make the Dallas Cowboys to live up to their America's team moniker and you want them to be the face of the league, act like it. Please act like it. Because right now, what you are doing is indicative and reflective of a third-rate organization that didn't have a plan, that is completely reactionary. And the only time things work out for the Dallas Cowboys seems to be them falling backwards into it. Think about Dak Prescott as the number one example right now. You got him in the 4th round. Tony Romo was supposed to be your starter for years. And he gets hurt. And and you just happen to have identified a guy that can actually take over for. Well,
not only that, Romo himself was an undrafted free agent who flirted with getting cut for 3 or 4 years before he became a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. That was just the most recent example
that, like, you didn't find a diamond in the rough as much as you just stumbled upon a lost stone. Like when someone loses an already polished stone and whatever, like you didn't polish it yourself. You didn't you didn't do all of the things necessary to find the diamond in the rough. You just happened to find one, get lucky on the ground.
Jerry Jones took issue with the idea that he's not willing to step outside of his comfort zone. And he declared this hire, mind you, in front of Brian Schottenheimer, his new head coach. He said that this is as risky a hire as you could make because Brian Schottenheimer has never been a head coach and because Brian Schottenheimer never called plays for the Cowboys, because Mike McCarthy did that, he called this a risky hire and pushed by beat writers and reporters in Dallas about why not gun for a Ben Johnson or somebody like that. He said Schottenheimer is that. He's just already in the building. And again, I'm not here to say whether or not this will work because I've seen stranger things happen.
Sure. And this is all nothing against Brian Schottenheimer either. I mean, obviously he's good with people. Obviously, I mean, he's grown up around in this environment. That's the benefit of being a Nepo baby, is that this is all you've ever known. So I have no doubt in my mind that he is a good coach. But is he being set up for success by an owner that's saying you're essentially coaching for your job starting year one?
History suggests no, and that's the other point worth hitting on. Don't love to see Stephen Jones refer to it as people saying it's a 29-year championship drought with air quotes.
We can't argue facts. I know there's so many people that think you can argue facts, but you cannot argue facts.
Scare quotes are for like opinion or less slighting something. I think it's got to be frustrating if you're a Cowboy fan to see the demeanor and the approach of the people that ultimately call the shots for your franchise,
right,
behaving the way that they did at this press conference. Hopefully Brian Schottenheimer is a good enough coach to overcome it. Maybe he will be, but
the deck's already kind of stacked against him. And for that, I'm sorry, Cowboy fans.
There's 29 years of history, not in scare quotes, very real, very real 29 years of history that suggests that it's going to be tough for him to do that. We'll see where it goes. I will say this. I feel better about Brian Schottenheimer now than I did on Friday. It's everything else about the Cowboys that gives me a lot of pause. All right, let's go to a situation that's near and dear to your expertise.
Oh boy.
Again, let's not spend a lot of time catching up on the events of it, because like I said, I think by now, if you care enough about the NFL to be watching this, listening to this, you probably know. But Liam Cohen told the Jags no. The Jags responded to that by saying, please, we will fire the GM. We will do whatever you want. We will give you so much money if you come back and take our job. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers said, we want you back as our offensive coordinator. We'll make you the highest paid coordinator in the NFL, but you can't talk to them anymore. And Liam Cohen said, oh no, I have bad reception. Oh, my phone's not working. And now he's the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Clearly a lot of feelings about this in the state of Florida.
Yeah. Rightfully so. I get it. Listen, so much of this business is done behind closed doors. There is a game behind the game to be played. And Liam Cohen got caught playing the game behind the game. And listen, I get it if you're Tampa's front office where you're like, what else could we have done? We gave you your shot. We offered to make you the highest paid offensive coordinator. We have such good offensive pieces here still. You work so well with Baker Mayfield. This is all that we can offer you, but it's a really good offer. And you know, we took a chance on you in the first place. And then for him to go back to Jacksonville, which I don't blame him for either. That's the thing, is like two things can be true. That can be kind of a slight, but at the same time, if you put yourself in Liam Cohen's shoes, why in the world would you tell the Bucs that you can get rid of that offer on the table just for the chance that this does end up working out with Jacksonville before you know it's a sure thing and before you know that you even want it for the most part? That's the biggest thing to me where I'm like, I see it from both sides. I really do. And it's a business at the end of the day. So you have to do what's right for you. And there's no guarantees in the NFL. And who knows if Liam Cohen would have been able to get a head coaching job this next cycle if he would have still been one of those hot candidates.
Bobby Slowick,
I was just going to bring
hot
up.
shot OC in Houston.
He garnered head coaching interest last year, and now all of a sudden he's out in Houston. Like, that's how quickly things can change. So I don't blame Liam Cohen for doing this. I don't blame the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for being a little slighted. I just think that this was what Liam Cohen felt was his opportunity to go and be a head coach, especially when the Jags did do, you know, they went out there and they said, all right, we're going to try to get you any way, shape or form. You're our guy. We're going to fire the GM, which I mean, they should have done in the first place.
I don't think the Bucs are wrong to be salty, because losing sucks. And that's Absolutely. What this is. You lose out on a coveted candidate. I think be salty all you want, right? Like, be salty when your team loses. I get it. I think the Bucs don't have much of a real argument to stand on here, in my opinion, other than just it sucks to lose.
Yes.
Because I think what gets lost so much when we talk about this stuff, because these are sports teams, because there are fan bases and you compete to win very real games and you pass this stuff down to generations and your kids become fans and all that good stuff. Still just a company, folks. Still just a Fortune 500 company, and I'm looking for the person that would be completely above board in this situation. Yeah. If the standard was the same at your accountant job and a different firm was offering you this, but maybe your current firm doesn't need to hear about it, you wouldn't play it any other way, and I don't believe you if you say that you would. And it just so happens that this is a sports team, and that makes it feel different, and it makes it feel like loyalty is more part of it.
Yes.
Which, by the way, okay, if you even want to sell me on like buy-in during the season and like we're pulling together, we're all rowing in the same direction. Season's over, guys.
Yeah.
Third of the roster is going to be out the door in the next couple months. We're going to draft all new players. We're going to fire some of our coaches.
Or some of them are going to leave for other things. I mean, they lost their defensive line coach.
There's no loyalty in this thing once the season is over and the goal has either been accomplished or you didn't get there. So the Bucs have every right to be salty because it sucks to lose. I don't think they really have a leg to stand on. Now, before we go any further on that, I do just now have a reaction to all of this because I was excited for this hire. I'm still excited for it. Liam Cohen helped Baker Mayfield get 40 touchdowns.
Yes.
Don't think he nailed his introductory press conference.
For as much as I've talked to guys over in Tampa and how much they've loved playing for Liam Cohen and that he had the buy-in of the roster and they loved his scheme and all of this kind of stuff. For as much as I heard that, he got to the podium and I was like, that's the guy that's been getting up and speaking to you in offensive meeting. Because the way Todd Bowles runs his ship, that offense is the offensive coordinators. Like he's the head coach, he's the defensive coordinator, and he lets y'all worry about the offense. That's how he operates. And that's why his last two coordinators have now gotten head coaching jobs. Because they essentially were head coaches of the offense. And they have to address the offense as a whole. Sometimes they address the team as a whole. And this was not a guy.
He looks like he doesn't have a lot of experience doing it.
Maybe it's just, Duval. That's a really like specific thing that you have to like really have some experience with to nail. And he just didn't. Quite.
He used an acronym too. Like he said, they're going to play fast, AKA fundamentally sound, attacking, situational masters.
Okay.
Tough.
I know that.
I hate when an acronym has extra words. Like you're cheating there.
Oh yeah.
Like situational masters. You're adding letters to the word. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
Listen, a lot of coaches use acronyms. We, as the general viewing public, do not need to know them. I do not, because I have PTSD from the HITS principle in Chicago under Matt Eberflus.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Which again had extra words also because T was like the ball.
Yeah, keep that in the meeting room.
Keep that in, trust me, there are acronyms in more meeting rooms than there aren't. As someone who has seen the whiteboards in a lot of those, you do not need, because there's nothing to be gained from that if you're the head coach, because the media is just going to latch onto it and you're never going to hear the end of it. And if it doesn't come to fruition, it's really going to kind of turn on you there.
People are going to say, Liam Cohen, he's going to be out of Jacksonville fast.
Right.
That's
something like that. Or they're going to come up with other words that, it's not if any coaches watch this, just don't tell us your acronyms. You can use them. I know y'all use them. Don't tell us.
One last thing I want to offer on this before we move on is just, I love the way that result will inform this, because there's two ways that I could see this going. Shad Khan, the owner of the Jags, he kept his GM against the advice of everyone in the world.
Literally everybody.
Fired him when it cost him a shot at Liam Cohen and threw Liam Cohen all this money.
And presumably also may have cost him Ben Johnson too, because Ben Johnson apparently reportedly did not like the setup.
Also, reportedly making Liam Cohen part of the general manager hiring process in Jacksonville. All that to say, if Liam Cohen is as amazing as he looked in Tampa and Trevor Lawrence gets unlocked the way that Baker Mayfield did, this will be a really cool story about how the Jags...
Liam Cohen turned around the Jags fast.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. You're proud of yourself. Also, the power of identifying your man and getting him at no expenses, no holds barred.
Yes.
If this doesn't work,
oh boy,
it is a real tough look on the Jags to do all of this and willy-nilly hire and call guys back and sneak around and throw unprecedented amounts of money at guys with short resumes and have it blow up in your face. Either somehow would not surprise me, but that's sort of what we've come to expect from the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I think they have every right to be excited right now if Liam Cohen...
Even if he didn't get Duval right initially, he'll learn.
All right, let's wrap this up. A couple other notes to get to. Also over the weekend, familiar face, back in the NFL, Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
The new head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Also, speaking of Tampa, being joined by a friend of yours, John Spytek.
Yeah.
Of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Shout out Spy.
Let's just keep the theme of introductory press conferences, because Spytek had a little bit of a gaffe. Pete Carroll made it a funny gaffe. Did you see this?
No.
So John Spytek wanted to shout out his high school coach about hey, I made it here to the general manager role of an NFL team. I appreciate you. I hope you're proud of me. But he said his high school coach, he's 75 years old. He's still doing it. He won't give it up. And he looked over at Pete Carroll, who is 73
I'm
years
so sad
old.
I missed this. I'm going to go back and watch it right now.
Pete Carroll nailed it because he just goes, "What are you looking at me for?" But it's a valid point that, look,
he's a young 73. Pete Carroll is a young.
And I think,
honestly, anybody that's been around Pete Carroll, though, like I say that facetiously, I'm not actually being facetious. Like he is a young 73. You'd never know.
That's what the Raiders have to be counting on. Because yeah, I mean, if you look at the number, you're like, we are in need of a full rebuild.
Right.
The way that the Seahawks were in need of one all the way back in 10 when they hired Pete Carroll.
Yep.
He's 73, but if you've ever watched Pete Carroll, I personally don't really care about that.
Right. No,
like,
I don't either. Not when it's him. I think that could be prohibitive for some people.
But not for Pete Carroll.
But not for Pete Carroll. Right.
He's going to have a lot of work to do.
He is.
The Raiders have no quarterback, no clear path to getting there. I mean, they do have $94 million in cap space, but outside of Sam Darnold, who probably doesn't excite you as much as he did a month ago, I don't know what the market looks like. The Raiders picked 6th in the draft, which you would guess
gets them out of the running for.
Yeah, it might take you out of the running for one of the big time prospects. So I don't see a clear path to a quick turnaround here. I mean, even the Commanders, who I didn't see turning themselves around super quickly, did have the number 2 overall pick in a quarterback rich draft. I don't think that's the situation Carroll finds himself in. So I hope he is bought in for like a 3-year process the way that he was in Seattle.
And I mean, so he had a lot of personnel control in Seattle. John Spytek is a first-time GM, but Spy has been one of Jason Light's like Jason Light's right-hand man for years at this point. Spytek came up in the Bucs organization. He came up under Jason Light. They also, if you recall, went through a quarterback kind of turnover. What are we going to do? There's no good options. We're not picking high in the draft, and there's not a good free agent class after Tom Brady. And they got Baker Mayfield, who they had been interested in for a while. Like, the biggest thing that I can say about what Jason Light does really, really well, and therefore what Spytek has done really, really well, is have a plan. They have always had GMs will talk till they're blue in the face about how you need to be thinking 2, 3, 4 years ahead. These guys have walked it for so incredibly long. And Spy is such a huge component of that. Spy is also so good at identifying talent regardless of what round they come in. I mean, the Bucs have drafted so incredibly well over the last few years, and really for most of Jason Light's tenure. You have found guys like, I mean, I think about Ali Marpet, Pro Bowl guard, got from Hobart College, or Alex Kappa, who's now at the Bengals and was awarded a big contract there, and all that. Came out of Humboldt State, who doesn't even have a football program anymore. And like, you see these guys come out of later rounds that end up being huge contributors and just end up being really good football players. Spytek just has a really good grasp on what makes a good football player, not just a guy that's good at football, but a football player. And I think that he's going to bring that to Las Vegas. I know everybody's talking about the Tom Brady connection. Him and Tom know each other from Michigan, which is true. But make no mistake about it, Spy has the credentials, and he was part of the GM cycle, hiring cycle last year, interview with the Broncos. He's had multiple interviews. He's had interest around him for so many years at this point, and he's been ready for this, and I'm really excited for him. And I'm really excited for Las Vegas because I think that him and Pete Carroll, with all the experience that Pete Carroll has, they can work really, really well together.
I think I don't worry about Carroll's ability to bring enthusiasm and culture, always compete. Can you win the game in the first quarter? Like, all that stuff that Pete Carroll is famous for. He's going to do that. I think Spytek is the key to this, and whatever role that Pete Carroll plays in it as well. Because like, you just go back and look, kudos to them that Brock Bowers is already one of the best tight ends in the league. It's one of their only good decisions with a major draft pick in the last decade. I mean, you can go back. Trevon Merrick has become a good player, second round pick. Josh Jacobs was good, but he's not there anymore.
Yep.
Colton Miller, good player. We're all the way back to 2018. Amari Cooper, wonderful player. He left the Raiders ages ago. Other than that, not a ton of hits with big-time resources. If you can start doing that,
Right.
Pete Carroll can probably coach them into a good team. But I see this being a multiple-year process. I hope the Raiders are committed to it, because that's the other thing, too. Not a lot of continuity with the Raiders in quite a minute. So hopefully that changes.
That's true.
Let's wrap it up with, of course, I got to hit the latest Bears news. I think the Ben Johnson hiring is ancient history at this point.
It is. I know, and I was literally just talking to him on Wednesday when I was at Hallis.
It was only a week ago, but that's how things move in the coaching cycle. But he did hire his two major coordinators.
Yes.
Dennis Allen is joining the Bears as defensive coordinator. Declan Doyle as
sounds like an
offensive
author, like a mystery author, like
or
an Irish,
yeah,
like
turn of the century
Irish, like Declan Doyle. Like it just it sounds great. I've actually talked to some people that coach with him in Denver, and everybody's looking for kind of that whiz kid, and Ben Johnson
was the whiz
and
kid.
right. Well, guess what position group Declan Doyle coached in Denver? He was a tight ends coach. I'm of the volition too that I think that tight ends coaches make really good coordinators because they already understand most of the offense because of what tight ends are tasked with doing. You have to be part of the offensive line, part of the receiving game, all that other stuff. I think that they make great coordinators. But Ben Johnson can be calling plays. So the fact that he's young and upcoming, I think is great because he's going to get all of this experience kind of being the coordinator side of things while Ben Johnson is still going to call plays. And then the biggest thing to me was this Dennis Allen hire in Chicago because
I think that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. I think so much of what makes some of these first-time head coaches falter a little bit is that they're not surrounding themselves with enough experience, not just from the play calling standpoint, but from the being a head coaching standpoint. That is such a huge learning curve for anybody. And it's going to be a learning curve for Ben Johnson, who at his press conference talked about how he realizes it's a completely different skill set. He even admitted that he didn't feel ready for that jump last year, which is why he ultimately pulled out of the coaching cycle. He wasn't ready, and he knows that it's going to be tough, and he's going to have a learning curve. Surrounding yourself with a guy like Dennis Allen, who has been a head coach before, on top of having a top 10 defense for the last however many years that he has, that is so incredibly huge. And the other thing that I really enjoyed that Ben Johnson talked about was that he knows the importance of delegation and allowing your guys to do their jobs, which is what he picked up from Dan Campbell, of empowering your guys to do their jobs. And you feel so much better about that when it's a guy that has as much experience as Dennis Allen does and can run the defense autonomously, where he is the head coach of the defense. Ben Johnson does not need to worry about that side of the ball. And then he can worry about the game management of it all plus play calling, because that's going to spread anybody thin. I can't say enough about how I love this. They've never worked together, him and Ben Johnson, but there's a lot of overlapping DNA between Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn, those guys working in New Orleans with Dennis Allen. It's such a small world in general.
You're already seeing it. Because as these guys keep expanding outward and getting new jobs, you're seeing the influence of those late Sean Payton Saints coaching staffs. Sean Payton's coaching tree.
His coaching tree is all of a sudden
like Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn, Joe Brady up in Buffalo got his start with the Saints. There's a half dozen more. Ben Johnson, I don't know if you really count that as part of Sean Payton's coaching tree. But it has a very direct tie when you're talking about Dan Campbell coming from there. And to go back to your other point, I just think it's such a cheat code to have an experienced, good defensive coordinator who's probably not going anywhere. Like Dennis Allen's had 2 shots as a head coach. He's probably, no shade to him, but he's probably going to have this job for as long as he wants it. He's certainly not going to get another head coaching call in the immediate future. All you have to do is look at the current Super Bowl favorite, the Kansas City Chiefs, Steve Spagnuolo.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to put that on the Chicago Bears, but you see this all the time with successful teams where a guy like Dennis Allen can lead the defense, call the defense, make those adjustments, get some continuity, build a system. and keep it rolling. I mean, for that matter, Todd Bowles is another one. What he did for Tampa Bay as the guy calling their defense and letting Tom Brady do everything. This is a very tried and true method for success where the offensive-minded head coach can worry about everything else and just let the grizzled old defensive coordinator worry about that. And I think Dennis Allen's going to do a great job.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what Chicago has always been built on. I know it's a new age and you want more offense out of these Bears, and you have the potential for that with guys like Caleb Williams, Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, who were all there, by the way, at Ben Johnson's press conference. But you need a complimentary badass defense, especially in the city of Chicago. That town, you will never escape that narrative, even if you end up with a good offense. That town is a defensive town to its core, and you need to that needs to be right before anything else. And I think that Dennis Allen is the one to do it. I was so incredibly stoked for them.
It's so easy to imagine, like, as much as the Bears have just been desperate for success, like, it's easy to imagine a world where Ben Johnson gets the offense rolling, but they're giving up like 30 points a game, and like nobody in Chicago's happy about it. Like, what happened to Bear football?
Yes.
What happened to our defense?
Yes, absolutely. Like, if what happened in Detroit happened in Chicago, like this past year, where, I mean, that was all injuries. I get it. Again, that's not at all a knock on Aaron Glenn. It was just, he was performing miracles. But like, if you don't have the peace of mind that a really monster defense gives you, see what I did there?
I do.
Chicago just doesn't want any of it. But listen, there's still going to be a learning curve here. Let me repeat that for Bears fans. There's still going to be a learning curve here. Be patient, because it should pay off.
You keep trying that, and it's not ever going to work.
I know.
It's not ever going to work.
Works.
But step at a time. We'll worry about just how good the Bears are going to be later. I think it's a nice couple of hires. I think they're in a good spot. Ironically, Dennis Allen going to Chicago just highlights the only job that's still open is the New Orleans Saints vacancy that he left behind back in the middle of the season. The way this works, now that I've said it, they'll probably fill it like 3 hours after we finish this recording. But that does it for the conversation. That does it for the show. Carmen, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a fun season.
That does it for the show. Thanks to Carmen. Thanks to Jay Glazer, as always, for stopping by. We will be back on Thursday. I said it earlier, but we've got our postseason awards show. Head on over to our YouTube channel. Voting is open. You can vote on who you think our postseason awards should go to. We're going to dive into all of it, hand out our postseason awards as we get ready for NFL honors next week. Take an early look at how all those different races might play out. So head on over to YouTube. Help us sort it all out with your vote. Until then, make sure you subscribe. Go find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. We will be here Thursday, and we will be with you all week next week leading up to the Super Bowl as well. So plenty of content coming your way. As always, I appreciate it. We'll chat with y'all on Thursday.